My name is Tony Duncan. Welcome to the Indigenous Earth Summit.
Thank you, Brother Tony, for getting this party started. Y'all, tonight is about celebrating Mother Earth. Decolonizing Wealth Project is thrilled to host this event to celebrate the progress we're witnessing, thanks to the leadership of Indigenous folks on the front lines of defending our planet and its resources. Indigenous peoples have lived in harmony with Mother Earth as custodians and guardians of the land for generations. Yet we know that the climate crisis will remain just that if Indigenous leaders and communities are not centered and leading solutions for both conservation and climate change. Indigenous leadership to support, protect, and conserve land can reverse climate destruction. Despite contributing the least to this crisis and having ancient and traditional solutions, Indigenous-led organizations and tribes receive a small percentage of philanthropic climate funding. In addition, Indigenous nations and communities are largely excluded from regional and national discussions on both climate change and conservation. Decolonizing Wealth Project is here to change this reality. Throughout the evening, you'll be invited to join us in amplifying our voices and in moving resources, money, to this work through our Indigenous Earth Fund at Liberated Capital. Please join us on social media, tweet, follow us, and give at the links that we will provide throughout the program. And now, our first panel is stacked with amazing Indigenous leaders who are doing big things in the realms of climate justice, land protection, environmental justice, and research. Up next to talk about the future of climate and conservation, we have Jade Begay, an Indigenous rights and climate justice advocate, organizer, and filmmaker. Jade serves on the advisory committee for our Indigenous Earth Fund and has partnered with numerous coalitions and organizations to build campaigns to mobilize engagement and impact around issues like climate change, Indigenous self-determination, and environmental justice. Jade is the Climate Justice Campaign Director at Indian Collective and will be moderating today's conversation. Welcome, Jade. Joining Jade, we also have on the advisory committee for the Indigenous Earth Fund, Judith LeBlanc. And Judith is the director of the Native Organizers Alliance, a national Native training and organizing network that is on the front lines of some of our most critical environmental justice fights. Welcome, Judith. And then we have Dr. Cal Whyte, a University of Michigan George Willis Pack professor at the School for Environment and Sustainability, and he's also an affiliate professor of Native American Studies and Philosophy. Dr. Whyte serves on the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council and the board of directors of the Pesticide Action Network North America, to name a few affiliations. Dr. Whyte, thank you for being here. And I'll pass it over to you, Jade, to take it away.
Thank you so much, Edgar. Hello, everyone. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Awesome. It's always a thing getting all the technology to cooperate. That was a lovely introduction. And I just want to, provide my own introduction to you all. So, Yate Bene, Yate, actually, it's probably afternoon. I'm calling from abroad, so my time zones are a little jumbled at the moment, but making it work. And I'm Jade Begay. I'm a climate organizer, an Indigenous rights activist. I'm from Tesuque Pueblo. That is the community I grew up in, the community I am accountable to. I am also a descendant of the Diné people, as well as the Southern Ute people, and just really honored to be here with you all. Thank you to all the participants, the people joining us for this summit. It's the hour could not be more urgent for us to be gathering to acknowledge and celebrate and honor our Mother Earth. And I am just so honored to be here with two people who I really just look to as role models, as mentors, really privileged really to work with these two people in different capacities, Judith and Dr. Whyte. And I'm just going to pass it over to you both just to get straight into it and let you both introduce yourselves, and then we'll just dive into the questions. So Judith, can you please kick us off with a intro?
Well, thank you, Decolonizing Our Project, for giving us the opportunity to be celebrating and really sharing some of our questions, some of our insights. I'm the executive director of the Native Organizers Alliance. I'm a citizen of the Caddo Nation, and I am way, way urban. I have a Boston accent. I've been the mockery all over Indian country because of it. So I'm very glad to be here. Native Organizers Alliance, it's a national organizing and training network. We've been around for over a decade. We grew out of the grassroots mobilizing to pass the Affordable Care Act, which had embedded in it, the Indian Health Reform Act. So we've come a long way from a decade ago, a long way in understanding the role and the nature of grassroots organizing in Indian country, doing it Indian style. Dr. Whyte.
Miigwech, Judith, and great to be in dialogue with you all. And thanks so much, Jade, for moderating our conversation. And my work is solely based on empowering Indigenous people as leaders in responding to climate change. I'm an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and a lot of my work centers around Potawatomi or Anishinaabe people and really focusing on what we bring to climate change leadership. And in my career, I've worked widely across a number of Indigenous-led climate change actions. I've worked directly with a number of tribes on climate change planning. I've worked more widely in educational programs, both for tribes, but also for tribal college students. And I work with a number of tribal colleges and universities on climate change leadership education. I'm part of research projects that bring an Indigenous perspective on data and open things up to ask questions that a lot of non-Indigenous scientists don't ask or are scared to ask. And I work a lot on climate change policy, and have had to be accountable in different roles in the federal government for the Anishinaabe and other communities that I know are impacted by the work that I do. And I also teach classes at the University of Michigan on Indigenous sustainability, Indigenous rights, and Indigenous environmental justice. Hey, I look forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Judith and Dr. Whyte. Yeah, and just want to acknowledge the extremely critical work that you both are doing, Judith, organizing, as you say, moccasins on the ground, turning out the Native vote, Dr. Whyte, for indigenizing data and research. Just today I was in a conference, and something that stuck with me was, we can't fix what we can't measure. And so your work to gather, both of your work to gather data on the issues that impact Indigenous peoples and communities is just, it's profound. And so just really honored again, and just grateful to both of your work and dedication to these issues. So, when we have these discussions about environment, climate, what have you, I never want to enter these conversations assuming that our audience knows all the things. There's so much to break down with these issues. So I think just starting with a very 101 question of, what does the general public need to understand about the urgency of climate change? What is at stake right now? What is, what are we learning from the most recent research and reports around climate change, and what are the most pressing issues for Indigenous peoples in the U.S. particularly?
Well, the urgency is clear. Research, reports, the UN just released another report. The facts are out there. But facts don't necessarily convince people to take action, or people wouldn't drive drunk or smoke cigarettes. Am I right or wrong? So we have a sense of this crisis, this urgency, on a fact-based evidence, but we also of life-based evidence and the kinds of weather that we're all experiencing. But the truth is this crisis that we're facing, this climate crisis, cannot be solved by one government. It cannot be solved by one grouping. It's a question and a solution that has to come from humanity. And so therefore, the most pressing issue that stands in the way of Indian country and tribal nations contributing to the collective solution is an issue of power, sovereignty, and our ability to be at the table, a part of decision-making when it comes to land, resources, water. Because the truth is this: power, the abuse of power, is what has brought us to the edge. And until we shift that power back into the hands of the grassroots, to the communities being affected by climate change, we will not have the kind of solutions that will work. I am totally convinced that Indians, Native nations, Native communities can bring a medicine into this discussion because of traditional practices, because of ways that science is now catching up with some of our traditional Indigenous knowledge. But in this way, we are the only peoples in this country and all over the world who have lived on our lands and collectively own it and have self-governance. We can bring some medicine, the good, the bad, and the ugly experiences to bear, and how we can develop a consensus for how to move forward and shift the power back into the hands of the people, Native peoples, and the communities affected. So from my vantage point, the most pressing issue we face is that of sovereignty and our ability to be at that table, to be represented and not just consulted. You know, right now, tribal consultation, it's a good idea. There's an executive order. We want not only consultation, which is important, and representation, which is critical, as we see from Secretary Deb Haaland's being in that position at the Department of the Interior, but we want to be a part of the decision-making so that we can bring our knowledge, our communities into the conversation on solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judith. And to the audience, you know, this is the time where I take out my notes and my pen, always learning and jotting down these really incredible pieces of wisdom from Judith, and I'm sure Kyle is about to drop some knowledge too. So, Kyle, you next.
I still need a second to finish my notes on Judith's incredible points. Let's cut to some music briefly. When I think about a lot of folks in the dominant society, they sort of perpetuate this myth that climate change is a brand new thing for everybody in the world. And what they're really saying is that it's their societies that never organized and developed over centuries in ways that accounted for climate change. And now they're shocked and horrified by the mess that they have gotten the world into. But if you ask a lot of our knowledge keepers, and a lot of us that have taken time to learn about our history, learn about our traditions, if you were to have the opportunity to ask our ancestors, they'd have been like, well, what did you think was going to happen if you built an entire society and never took into consideration environmental change, never took into consideration the relationship between weather and seasons? Indigenous peoples' traditions, and obviously I can speak for Anishinaabe traditions, but I've heard so many other Indigenous people say things that were very analogous to our own traditions, but with different twists and turns and traditions and aspects to them. But we developed entire social, political, cultural, economic systems where a well-ordered society was one that always considered climate change and seasonal change and other forms of environmental change in how it made decisions, in how it thought about safety and welfare and cultural vibrancy and economic success and wealth and other important aspects of communities. And so why would people in the world ignore centuries of wisdom about what it means to build a society without ignoring climate change? In fact, crafting entire cultures and ways of living around constant adjustment, adaptation to, respect for a constantly changing and dynamic world around us. And that's what our traditions bring. And in today's language, what we bring are traditions that are interdisciplinary, multi-dimensional. They don't silo anything. They connect all different generations together. They respect diverse forms of knowledge. They understand the relationships between people who have different accountabilities and different responsibilities and provide different pieces of the puzzle to ensure our communities are as responsive as they can be to both typical changes, but also disasters and extreme forms of change. And because we have these long memories, we also have a long memory about the United States or other dominant societies. The first climate change impacts we experience when we're thinking about the types of impacts that industrialization, racial capitalism, and colonialism have caused were when our lands were dispossessed of us to make way for the industries that we now know are responsible for the increases in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We were initially degraded by those industries several centuries ago. And up until today, we still struggle with the energy industry. We still struggle with the mining sector, the different industrial businesses that are able to get away with horrors on our lands and territories because it's cheaper for them to do so in a political climate where our own well-being is disrespected. That was a human-caused climate change impact. And if you look at every single aspect of the history of colonialism, we are affected by environmental changes caused by industrial, colonial, racial capitalist society. And even though now people are talking about the ramifications of atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the underlying mechanisms that have harmed us over generations now still haven't changed. And one of the biggest threats we face, in addition to the cultural, health, social, and economic impacts of climate change, is we're also going to be cut out of the renewable energy transition because our consent is still not respected, our self-determination is not honored, and because of the pervasive attack on our educational systems, we work very hard to try to empower young people in a society that is nonetheless very hostile to their leadership and their creativity and their ideas. And so a huge thing that we need to do is emerge as leaders in the energy transition, renewable energy, safe energy, and one that reflects a different way of being, a way that our ancestors would have been familiar with, the same way of being that makes it so that it's really not surprising that a society that never considered climate change and how it ordered itself has caused so much chaos and exacerbated so much injustice in the world.
Such great points. I'm going to just give you a moment to catch your breath, Kyle, but I have a follow-up question. You mentioned colonization as and colonialism as, you know, this root cause of climate change. And just this year, actually, in the last month, we had what I would call actually a win. This latest chapter in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, one of their latest chapters in their 2022 report actually named colonialism as a causation of climate change. This is huge as far as narrative and as far as naming, these factors that have caused this global phenomenon that is impacting Indigenous peoples worldwide. So not just meaningful for us here, in the US, but Indigenous peoples globally. And I just want to hear from you, how did this happen? How did this positive change happen?
Yeah, I appreciate you raising this issue, Jade. And as somebody that's served on a number of different scientific committees and stood for the importance of Indigenous knowledge, for traditional knowledge in the scientific realm, I really have an appreciation for actually the decades of Indigenous leaders, Indigenous movements that it took to get to this moment that is amazing how inspiring it is to you, Jade. Because what I've learned in my work, which has just spanned a few decades, is the importance of who came before. And whether it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change or another type of scientific report like the National Climate Assessment, if we look back at that history, we always find Native people, the 70s, the 60s, who are actually calling out the very same issues. And those people, even when they were saying things about climate change, about environmental justice to audiences that didn't get it, they did inspire other Native people. And so even though the record has often been erased, when I look at early scientific reports on climate change in the 80s and 90s, I can see that Native presence. And sometimes it is documented. The National Climate Assessment, for example, had a conference and included Indigenous voices and perspectives in the 1990s. And so all of these efforts that are largely unsupported, they're supported on a shoestring, for us to empower youth, knowledge keepers, members of tribes, people whose voices matter in dominant scientific processes, we know it makes a huge difference because all of this effort finally made it possible to crack one of the most closed scientific organizations in the world, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, closed from Indigenous knowledge. I actually served as a contributing author on the Working Group 2 report. And what I remember very clearly is that the weight of all of Indigenous people's contributions to other climate change reports is what pushed the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, to finally do real science, which is to demonstrate that climate change is not just a physical phenomena, but it's a phenomena that is inseparable from colonialism and inseparable from other forms of disempowerment. Judith's point about power, that's a great point, an important point. It's also real science. If you look objectively, if we can say such a word, objectively at climate change, that's what you find. You can't separate it from power. And so the support for Indigenous leadership in scientific fields, while it's not the only solution, it's an important one alongside the other solutions, the direct action, the community organizing, the climate change planning, the empowerment of tribal colleges and universities. But we certainly can't forget that, wow, when we intervene in these scientific reports, it makes a difference. And the more empowerment we have, we could do things much quicker. At this point, the National Climate Assessment, I think, has something like the U.S. National Climate Assessment, like at least 15 Indigenous authors and almost one Indigenous author on every single chapter. There's dozens of chapters in it. So let's do this across the board. Let's. So thanks for raising that, Jade.
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm hearing is we need more Indigenous researchers and scientists plugging into these reports and compelling these panels to, like you said, do better science. So yeah, just putting that call out there for more youth to be involved and be trained in climate in Indigenous data sovereignty work and science, climate science, and citizen science. I think it's definitely like a need we have right now. Switching over to you, Judith, you talked about power and sovereignty, and kind of switching gears here, but we understand that a very small percentage of funding goes to Indigenous-led organizations. Actually, the data point is that 0.4. So not even 1%. 0.4% of all philanthropic dollars in the U.S. goes to Indigenous-led organizations, and then towards climate and enviro and conservation, even less. So, when we're talking about power, what might happen if we see a consistent surge of funding, philanthropic investment specifically in Indigenous climate leadership? What happens when we are resourced?
Well, let's take it from where Dr. Whyte left it. And if those scientists, data scientists and climate scientists take the lead from the grassroots, they'll be headed in the right direction. So for example, if there's investments in Indian country, this is what could happen. We, Native Organizers Alliance, has been working for the last 6 years, almost 6 years, with the Brave Heart Society, the traditional Dakota Women's Society, their treaty council, and the Yankton tribal government to regain co-governance rights of 150 miles of the Missouri River. In the wake of Standing Rock, which interrupted the narrative of who we are in the 21st century, elders got together and said, we have a dream of regaining, co-managing, bringing our wisdom to bear on 150 miles. And we said, we want in on it. We want to help you. What can we do? And the interesting thing is that we've been able to not only bring some brave foundations in to invest initially, the Leo DiCaprio Foundation, and made the initial investment in this 10-year plan. And what happened is that investment led to the grassroots being able to lead and bring to the tribal leadership the urgency of regaining co-management rights, regaining sovereign inherent rights to co-manage. But the truth is that because of the lack of investment in Indian country, because of chronic underfunding and the federal government not doing its job in fulfilling treaty rights, tribal governments have a hard time building up the technical capacity to co-manage. And what we were able to do with the support of philanthropy is to bring in native and non-native scientists and weave it together with the spiritual and traditional teachings of the folks on the ground, of the tribal government, the grassroots, the traditional women's society, the treaty council. And that braiding of traditional lived experience with science is a critical need right now, but we have to be invested. There has to be investment in building up the technical side. For example, the Environmental Protection, Tribal Environmental Protection Agency only had a half-time employee. So water testing, how do you do that? How do you test the water? And then there was a climate event, terrible flooding after a supercell storm, flooded White Swan community with contaminated water from the lake that flows into the river, drove away people who've been living together for a number of generations in White Swan and dispersed them all over Yankton Reservation, contaminating the soil in these houses. But the truth is, the resources were not there for the tribe to immediately respond. And so the water project that we've been working with Brave Heart Society and Faith Spotted Eagle and the Yankton tribal government is such that we've been able to bring the grassroots involved into testing water, citizen science. Ihanktuan citizen science supplement the tribal government's ability to monitor what is going on with the river and therefore lay the basis for regaining and working with the Bureau of Land Management and the Army Corps of Engineers on an equal footing. We can't just come to the table and demand our rights. We have to have that basis, and only through the investment of philanthropy can this be possible. And frankly, philanthropy only exists because the government has failed. The government has failed in fulfilling our treaty rights, and the government has failed the people of this country in their role in protecting the land and the resources and the environment, and having a foreign policy that actually leads towards solution of climate crisis. You take the current situation in Ukraine, the oil companies have used it as an excuse to jack the prices of gasoline. They're making mega profits, just like the pharmaceuticals are making mega profits off of the COVID pandemic. But the truth is this: the government is here to regulate on behalf. That was the original founding documents based on Haudenosaunee teachings of law and governance, was to protect the land, to protect the people, to live a good life. And at this point, what we need is for people to understand that the past, our ancestral knowledge, not just Indians, but the people's ancestral knowledge and the past meets the future and how future generations will live in the present. That's the only place in the timeline, in our time, cosmos, intertribal understanding is in the present. So how we walk, what we do to empower the grassroots to lead, what we do to empower tribal governments to be resourced to play their sovereign inherent role as caretakers is critical. And if philanthropy funds that weaving of science and traditional teachings and knowledge, then solutions will come about. And that's what's happening at Yankton. You have some of the most innovative new grassroots projects sprouting up in Indian country, both urban and res, when there's been just a little bit of funding. So think about what medicine we could bring to the solution of the climate crisis if philanthropy played its role in supporting our leadership.
Judith, thank you so much for that call to action. And I'm just going to leave us with this envisioning, or this vision for the year 2050, where Indigenous peoples are governing. We are co-managing lands. Traditional ecological knowledge is leading us through climate adaptation and through the just transition away from extractive economy towards regenerative economy. And we get there through Indigenous data, through Indigenous science, through brave investment from philanthropy and foundations, and also the public sector. I will say we need that investment as well. So we could talk all night or all day about this, and I unfortunately have to wrap us up here, but just ahead to Judith and Kyle and everyone at Decolonizing Wealth for having us this evening. Really honored to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Thank you. That was so amazing. Before I came on camera, I was like shouting next to my chair, like, oh, so good. If we ended this program right now, you have all heard everything that you need to know, especially from my friend and elder Judith. Thank you to this panel. Now, you all, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we have more. You're now in for something quite special. Our next performance is by Lumbee superstar singer-songwriter Alexis Raeana. Tonight, Alexis will be singing her single "Keep My Memory," and stay tuned for more exciting conversations.
Hey y'all, it's your girl Alexis Raeana, the Southern Scorpio, and I am so stoked to be performing for the 2022 Indigenous Earth Summit. The song that I'll be performing this evening was written by myself, my dear friend Charly Lowry, as well as Wylie Withers. This song is dedicated to the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and our two-spirited relatives who never made it home. This is my debut single, Keep My Memory. Gotta get away though, some things never change. It's pumping through my veins, nobody ever asked. Now you're running from the past, it's true. 'Cause I've had enough of your dirty little ego. Educated boy, you should know. After all the blood we paid, you're calling shots for me. Give me all the liberty that's due. 'Cause I've had enough. Just set me free. You keep my memory. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up how, Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up how, Lord. Tend the river, let me flow. The dark river still cuts my soul. Enough of the shame. I'm tired of playing games. I got bigger, better things to do. 'Cause I've had enough of when the red fears grow. 7 they won't feel their pain. I'm praying for change. This crimson dress is torn, and it's something I've been born into. 'Cause I've had enough. Just set me free. You can keep my memory. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up how, Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up how, Lord. Go now, can't be knocked down. Rise up now, up high, oh Lord. Yeah. To keep my memory, my pride, my power, my will. Give me liberty, the strength in my heart. Keep my memory, my pride, my power, my will. Give me liberty, the strength in my heart I feel, yeah. 'Cause I've had enough. Just set me free. Keep my memory.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Alexis. And we have one more special treat for you all tonight. Next up is the debut screening of a short film, Renewing the Earth. Renewing the Earth is a perspective piece highlighting Indigenous knowledge and climate change produced by the 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples and featuring the words and wisdom of its president, Chris Peters.
We're earth healing people, earth renewing people. And through the belief that the world is alive, she has rights. Our belief systems and our ceremonies are geared around a concept of forever lasting life. That if we do ceremonies, live in a good relationship with all that is alive around us, we will live forever and forever and forever. If we violate natural systems, natural order, if we violate Indian law, if you will, that it will come back on you. 5,000, 10,000 years ago, non-native peoples began to drift away from that concept and look at the earth as something that they could use to dominate, to control. And it has brought on a history of relationships to the earth that has caused destruction beyond human comprehension. Some people say within 10 years, we're going to begin to overshoot environmental systems, and systems will begin to fail. And once one system fails, others will follow shortly. How do we survive what's coming? How do we survive the change in climate? How do we survive the change in heat? When our relatives here around me, the redwood trees, are going to be impacted in the worst possible way. They've existed here for thousands and thousands of years. There's no place to migrate for these trees. Their movement is too slow, and this is the only place that they can live now. So we begin to see systems change. And with Indigenous peoples, we're generally the first to notice that. We live closest to the earth. We depend upon that relationship for our own survival. We understand things are moving up in altitude, moving north in climate, and moving away from us. Indigenous peoples have an opportunity to understand who we are as people and identity and belief system, to understand that responsibility to take care of things. How do we heal the river? How do we bring the water spirit back to life? How do we become native to a land? It's re-indigenizing, the exercise of our sovereignty again over major chunks of land. And that sovereignty of self-governance and self-relationship to lands will teach people better to understand where they're living and how to live there. And that there is a process of reciprocity and respect for all living things. Not only Native peoples understand that, but we have a responsibility to share it with non-Native peoples. Humankind has violated natural law, and it is coming back on people. It's coming back on people hard, and we will soon experience that more blatantly than we have ever in the past. So we don't have much time, and we urge people to listen to what Native peoples, wisdom keepers are saying, to take the necessary steps to bring about real change in how people live, where we understand there is a relationship, that everything is alive again, to see things flourish again, to create an environment that is lush and rich. We have that opportunity that's before us, not only sustain, but to thrive again. We can do it.
Such a beautiful video and message. And thank you, Seventh Generation Fund, for allowing us to debut the film here today. There's so much power in media and film. The power of representation and storytelling to shift culture and narratives is something this next panel does on a daily. Here to talk with me about the power of Indigenous cultures to fight climate change are Quannah ChasingHorse. Quannah is an Indigenous land protector for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, protecting those sacred lands from oil development and fighting for climate justice. She is passionate about Indigenous sovereignty and rights, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and representation. Quannah was honored to make the 2020 list of Teen Vogue's top 21 under 21. She is an IMG fashion model and actress. Welcome, Quannah. We also have Princess Daazhrii Johnson, who is a writer, director, actor, producer, all the things, and is committed to helping to build capacity for other Alaska Native filmmakers. Princess is a Sundance Film alum, a Tia Oros Storytelling Fellow, and a creative producer and screenwriter for the first 2 seasons of Peabody Award-winning PBS Kids series, Molly of Denali. Welcome, Princess. And Dallas Goldtooth. Dallas is a national campaigner for the Keep It in the Ground campaign for the Indigenous Environmental Network, one of our grantee partners at our fund. He is a film producer, playwright, actor, and a comedian. He co-founded the 1491s, an all-Indigenous social media group that uses comedy and satire as a mean of critical social dialogue. And for you Reservation Dogs fans, who isn't a fan, you will recognize him as Spirit. Welcome, Dallas. Hi, relatives. Y'all ready for this?
No.
Welcome. I'm so excited about this conversation and just so excited to share space with you. You are doing such amazing things across the storytelling like medium, from film to fashion to television. Indigenous peoples are having a moment right now. So I'm curious what excites you about this moment, and how are you using your platforms to educate people about our communities and specifically the climate issues that are important to our people? I'll start with you, Quannah.
Hi guys. It's so nice to be on this call with everyone. I'm so excited. Uncles and aunties, how fun. Yeah, so basically for me, before I even started my modeling career, I was very much using my platform and growing my platform through my advocacy work, going to DC and lobbying, doing climate justice work all across the country. I even went to Canada at one point and spoke at a health conference. Doing those things and showing up with your community is something that I'm very honored to be a part of, but something that I'm very passionate about, and I continue to do this work in this modeling industry, which normally we don't have these conversations in the industry. Fast fashion and so on plays a big role into the climate crisis. And so to be able to inspire change in the industry and hold people accountable, designers, brands, companies, and so on, to be more environmentally friendly and hopefully, help change perspectives and show people, there is a way. Yeah, but for me, it's just continuing on this path, sharing stories, uplifting my own people, continuing to spread awareness in the industry where no one has or talks about these things. So, it's an honor to be able to be someone that can bring these conversations, to an audience that wouldn't ever expect to even talk about these things. But it's an honor to show up in these spaces and not just only represent my people with just my tattoos and me being there, but also educating in every space that I'm in, and uplifting my people in a way where I can share different nonprofit organizations that are also doing incredible work all across Turtle Island and beyond. So yeah, that's just what I be trying to do, I guess.
You're killing it, and I'm officially owning this uncle status role. I love that. Princess, what about you?
Yeah, I just feel like this is an incredibly liberating moment for so many of us, to see ourselves represented in this way. For so long, we were not able to tell stories on our own terms. And, to be at this place where we are gaining more narrative sovereignty. And of course, as we tell these stories, we bring our values with us. We model Native humor, especially Dallas Goldtooth models Native humor, for a worldwide audience, right? So it's like we're really busting down these stereotypes, but also opening hearts and minds. And Judith was talking about medicine, and our stories are that good medicine. They're healing, not only for us as Indigenous people, but they're healing for our Mother Earth. They're healing for our non-human relatives, and we bring that into the spaces that we enter. So I think this is an amazing moment, and I'm just so honored and grateful to be here as part of the conversation that we're having.
Thank you, Princess. What's up, Dallas? What do you have to say?
I like how the first two are like, so great, like just tell me everything, and you're like, what do you got to say? No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Edgar. Thank you to everyone for inviting us to be here. I firmly believe in the power of storytelling, that stories literally make up our world, right? Our entire fabric of existence, from our creation stories to how we send our loved ones off to the other world. It's all founded in stories. How our languages are founded in stories. Stories change the world. They also uphold the dysfunctions of the world. right? Stories replicate power structures that are decimating our communities, that are decimating the land, that are putting us on the path where this planet will not be sustainable for life if we continue the way it's going. Stories are creating these situations, and what we are trying to do is provide alternative stories, bringing our narratives to the forefront. I really like what Princess said, right? Is a narrative sovereignty. Like, we are taking ownership of who we are. And I think what I love about this moment right now in media is that it's not just Native peoples taking up space and then continuing the same like tragedy, like, you know, poverty porn narrative of like, oh, we're just so sad and look at all the hardships. Yes, we can talk about our hardships, but we're also talking about our beauty, our excellence, our power, our strength. And so I'm so grateful for all the media makers, the storytellers out there who are really doing some great work to change the narrative.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful for the Native humor that gets me through every single day. I'm curious from you all's perspective, what are some of the key climate issues or environmental issues that you're most concerned about right now that are impacting our communities? What do people need to know about what's going on, and how can folks help the specific causes you're campaigning on right now? Whoever wants to start, feel free to jump in.
Go. I will say that, right, talking about stories, right? The you know, one good story that just something that I was just reminded of yesterday is, you know, this whole story about, you know, carbon footprint. You know, it's a common thing. Like, what's your carbon footprint? Oh, look, fill out this app, find out your carbon footprint. Did you know that actually carbon footprint was created by British Petroleum, BP, came up with the term and the idea to calculate your carbon footprint? An oil company came up with that. And the thinking behind that was, let us make people focus on their individual actions and not think about the systemic actions that need to take place, right? Let's get people thinking about, what am I doing? How am I the problem? And not talk about how the system is the problem. And so those are things that is a key part of this fight, is us going after the system and really attacking it on all ends. And, you know, so when we talk about sea level rise up in Alaska, we talk about sea level rise in the Gulf Coast, we have to connect that narrative to the expansion of oil and gas in the Permian Basin, or in the Four Corners region, or wherever it may be, or the destruction of the boreal forests in Canada. Like, they're all connected. And so I think that's where the fight is right now, is connecting those narratives and understanding what was just said in the previous panel. Is we can talk about the causations of climate change. We could talk about fossil fuels and gas and oil and all that stuff. But really, colonization, colonialism created climate change. White supremacy created climate change. If we're not attacking those structures, then we're not addressing the problem. Powerful.
I just want to follow up with saying that, you know, I just got back from Southeast Alaska. I was at Sitka, where they just had this amazing herring spawning time, and there were so many whales. And just 3 weeks ago, there was an oil spill in that area. And so when I see that, and I think about, you know, my community and our, you know, decades long, you know, going on 40 years to keep oil drilling, you know, out of the calving grounds for the caribou, you know, I think about, you know, Hillcorp wanting to drill along the Yukon River, and the fact that there was a moratorium, like we couldn't fish for king salmon on the Yukon River. And so many communities were impacted by that. And we define our wealth by that freezer full of fish, because that's how we feed ourselves. That's how we, you know, share out what we have. And so that transition off of oil, and we're talking here about narrative change. I mean, that's something that, you know, the grassroots groups in Alaska have been talking about for years now. We're not an oil state. We're a whale state. We're a salmon state. We're a caribou state. we have to keep those waters clean. We have to do what we can to bring ceremony. And that video with Chris was just beautiful, because I think it spoke to, our role as Indigenous people. And just Dallas, thinking like really holistically, like the problem is it's this huge systemic change, and we all have the roles to play, right? It's really hard when you're given 3 minutes in front of a microphone to testify on something that means everything to you, as opposed to, us building the new. And so that just transition off of fossil fuels is happening in Alaska. It's happening, with, down in, with the Native Conservancy, with the kelp industry. It's happening with Alaska Native Renewable Energies. It is happening all over the place, and we need to uplift those stories as much as we still have to be, as Judith that says, moccasins on the ground. As much as we have to be at the front lines, we also have to build that new.
And I just wanted to play off of what Princess said, because, she pretty much explained we're both from Alaska, and I learn everything from my aunties and my mom. So this is where I learned my stuff from. But, playing off of kind of what she said, I just moved out of Alaska, and being away from home has been so hard for me because, me being home, I can show up better, and since I'm far away, I feel disconnected, and I feel like I can't show up in the way that I want to show up. But, I just wanted to quickly tell like a little story kind of relating to, honestly, not just climate issues, but, like Princess and Dallas said, it's all very systemic. And, food security is huge in Alaska right now because of these issues, because our people aren't being heard. We're being pushed away, like we have been for years. And, just one example was, one of my last times I was home, my mom, she lives off the land still, like she completely lives off the land. She has a dog team. And because our communities could not fish because of the devastation that our salmon are facing right now, not just because of climate change, but because of corporations and fisheries and so on. It's, to go back home and to see how much it's affecting our people, it's heartbreaking, because once I leave, I feel so helpless. And, that was like a big moment for me where, it made me feel like I wasn't doing enough, knowing that our people have been constantly, reaching to the point of burnout and beyond, trying to do this work and show up. Yet we still are fighting for this recognition. And going back home, my mom, she is really excited to start her team up again, really excited to feed our family traditional foods, really excited to live off the land. That's who she is. And she raised me to be like that as well. So me going home and feeling happy to be home and with my people and with my culture and being able to eat traditional foods that I can't access in the city, like feeling myself again was really good up until my mom came home crying because a whole dog team she lost a lot of dogs because of starvation due to our communities not being able to fish. And, we have hunting restrictions and so on. We can't live off the land because we're restricted in that way, and our rights are taken away. And, those are just examples of my own personal experience in that realm. And, leaving that was so hard for me, knowing that, there's so much going on back home that I just feel so detached. And I don't know, it was a really hard time. So I just think, sharing, like we said, and like Dallas and Princess said, storytelling is a big part of what we do. And it is how people can relate. People can, see true and real life experiences. People can hear that, people can feel that, and it makes them want to do something too. So sharing stories like that is what can grasp people's attention and help people realize it's not just affecting us as people, but it's affecting our animal relatives. our family is our dogs. That dog team is what also keeps our family alive. And so, you know, just recognizing that and, you know, seeing how much it's affecting not just us as people, but our relatives as a whole out on planet Earth, it's devastating. So I just wanted to quickly share that and follow up with what Princess said, because she basically said everything that I wanted to say as well. So yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that, Quannah. Yeah, you know, visibility is everything for us. And for so long, we have been invisible or not represented in so many spaces. You all are breaking through and changing that in so many different aspects, and it's so critical. And I really, truly believe that this representation in fashion, in media, in entertainment is making major significant impacts on shifting narratives and myths that people have about our communities. So I thank you all for that. And so I'm wondering for sort of two things that I feel like folks would want to know. One, there's so many Native young people who you guys are inspiring through your work. And so what might you say to young people who are looking to use their voice or to be heard or to be seen? And how can they do that in a way that it's giving back to our communities? And then folks who may be non-Native allies, right, who hear these stories, who want to support, who want to help, what might we say to folks who can help amplify the voice that we do have?
Princess.
Dallas. I mean, there's so many amazing programs out there, right? Like there's the Sundance Institute, there's Illuminatives, there's all sorts of, II has a really wonderful cinematic arts program. There's so many opportunities right now for people that want to really expand on their storytelling skills, or maybe they're actors or wanting to be producers. I'll just plug really quick that Quannah has a film that she's featured in and is also a producer on, premiering at Tribeca, which is really exciting, called Walking Two Worlds. And so again, it's like leaning towards, you know, telling these stories on our own terms. So there's all sorts of opportunities. And to answer your question about going about things, you know, the right way, we have this when we make anything, but in particular, if it's television or film, there's so much opportunity for capacity building. And the more that we can be, you know, utilizing and working with building capacity for our own cinematographers and actors and producers, etc. You know, animation. I can't forget animation, right? You know, it's really an exciting time because I really see that happening, and we need one another, and it's more fun. Like the more people you bring into the fold, like the more fun it is. Like we're totally done with like scarcity mindset, right? Like we're just living in this really beautiful time of abundance. So it's really exciting. Dallas, I'll hand it over to you.
I'll say is, yes, going off of that, like what I love about this moment for content creators and artists is that we're in such a beautiful collaborative moment. And I think that's where, if I had words of advice, is like, you can't do it alone. You have to like work with your friends, work out with relatives, like build relationship. I mean, that's what organizing is, right? Is finding others who think like you, or finding others who might be interested in the work that you're doing and saying, hey, I think together we can make this better, whether it's our community or whether it's a film or whether it's whatever it may be. Like we work together. And so I love the idea of collaboration. And you know, I wouldn't be where I'm at, especially with my acting career and the performance career, if it wasn't being collaborative with the 1491s and other Native artists, and just going outside of my comfort zone, saying, hey, I want to create something with you. I want to make sure that we work together. I think that's the beauty of it right now. And I think also the power, because of social media and the internet, we're also breaking down this idea that you have to go to these places of power like Los Angeles to tell your stories, and you don't have to. I mean, I was up at Princess's house and she was doing like editing for the TV show Molly for Denali in her house in You know what I mean? Like that's the beauty of it also, is that we are also reclaiming where the power is, and it doesn't have to be somewhere else. It's actually in our homelands. It could be in other people's homelands. Like, that's the beauty of all of this.
Amazing. Quannah, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, being a part of this young people's category or whatever, it is really beautiful to see, so many incredible, talented creatives, artists, and so on, stepping up and really utilizing the tools that we have now, to share these stories, to encourage one another. And, I am very grateful that I am able to tell my story in such a deep way. Princess mentioned this film that we've been working on for years, and I'm really honored and very thankful that this is something that I got to do. And I'm very grateful because it started off just me doing advocacy work, and, it followed me into my modeling career. And, I'm very vulnerable in this film, and I'm able to show, an audience, especially in fashion too, the name is walking two worlds, trying to find balance in my traditional way of life, and then this high fashion, fast-paced world. And they're two completely different worlds, but finding that balance. And like Dallas said, you don't have to leave home to create and do beautiful things and be in community with one another. It's, there's so many tools out there, and being, someone so young and seeing, incredible people and examples like Princess and Dallas that have been paving the way, for us young people to feel comfortable, to be able to be ourselves in these spaces. It's amazing, and I'm very grateful to be a part of this whole movement, whether it be climate justice or just showing up and taking up space. And yeah, I'm just really happy that young people are now able to, use these tools to also, they are coping mechanisms for some people, and we can find healthy ways to uplift one another and to be there for one another because of these tools. And yeah, that's really all I had to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. We have a lot of folks who tune into our programs who are philanthropists, funders, donors, folks who have been giving to our Indigenous Earth Fund and otherwise. So, we definitely have been raising money and moving money to support organizing work on the ground. And we've also had the chance to invest in some narrative change work or storytelling along with, excuse me, my voice, along with other folks like Seven Generations Fund, who did the beautiful film we saw earlier. I'm wondering if you have anything that you would want to say to folks who have resources to sort of advocate for more investment. We heard the stats earlier. Very few dollars going to Indigenous communities, tribes, leaders, very few for power building. And I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but I would imagine very few in the arts funding world. I know that Prince's and some of you have been involved in some of these government arts funding groups, but what do folks need to know to invest more, give more, to support storytelling, to empower and give the resources and tools to folks like yourselves and those who are coming behind you to tell our stories?
I would say that there are established institutions who have been contributing for years now to the arts, like specifically to Native artists. And I think that we should continue to resource up those institutions, but also there's not enough. I think there's always more space for more resources and grants and funding to go to Native artistry and artists. I think, I haven't been doing this like performance and artistry work for a while. Like, it always comes up. People always like compare ourselves to Canada, because like, oh, Canada, they got so much resources and all this stuff. Well, it's because there is a lot of institutional funding for arts, and specifically for First Nations artists out there. And it's a little bit different. Of course, it's not clear cut. It's always going to be grass greener on the other side kind of thing. But if we have to just continue to resource up those institutions and just create space, and also allow our folks to know they have access to these, right? And I think the last thing, and this is for funders and for people who have the resources and money, is to encourage you to give, but to not be so demanding, not to have strings attached to it. Just allow the artists, allow communities to decide for themselves how they use those resources and funds. That's the key, is especially in the world of art. People feel so obligated. They feel so entitled. They're like, oh, I'm giving to this, so I get to dictate it. Well, actually allow us to decide what art is, where it goes, and how we want to express it.
Absolutely. Anybody I saw the snaps there. We are being called at time here. I just want to keep talking with you all, but I know we have to go. You guys are.
Can I just add one more thing, Edgar?
Please do, Princess.
Really quickly. So I just came across this resource, a playbook for screenwriting in the age of climate change. On Instagram, follow them at Good Energy Story. I don't think it's just for screenwriting. I think it's really good for anyone that has an interest in getting out climate justice stories or talking about climate change in general. I think it's amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. I saw that on Instagram today too, and we'll repost that for folks. It looks like a fantastic resource. I'm truly inspired. You guys are amazing. I wish I could take a selfie with you right now. But just thank you so much. Keep killing it. I'm so proud. Our community is behind you. And yes, the progress and the wins are happening, and it's because of leaders like you. Appreciate you so much. So you all, sorry to have to cut these awesome conversations short, but we are beginning to move towards our closing. But before we go, we have just a few more things to share with you tonight. I wanted you to know that last year, Decolonizing Wealth Project launched the Indigenous Earth Fund. We've been talking about it throughout the night. We seeded the fund with an initial $1 million of investment from Liberated Capital, which is our fund, thanks to the more than 500 members that are a part of our giving circle and other funding partners. Last September, the fund made grants to 16 Indigenous-led organizations across the U.S. who are doing the work. Organizations like Native Organizing Alliance with Judith that you heard from, who are building power, building movements, leading policies, campaigns around climate change and conservation issues that are so important to our communities. As you've already heard, philanthropy and giving has often overlooked our communities, Indigenous leaders, tribes, and organizations, but we are working together to shift that. 100% of the dollars that come in towards this fund go to Native-led, Indigenous-led organizations and partners and tribes, because we want to celebrate and invest in the diverse wisdom that is present in our Indigenous communities, and the wisdom that is there has been cultivated for thousands of years. And we know that our very survival, not just us as Indigenous people, but all of us, our very survival is dependent on the leadership of Indigenous peoples. So this work is not possible without allies and co-conspirators. So I want to announce that tonight, DWP is committing to move another $1 million towards this fund this year. And while that's super exciting, we would like to do more. There's so much more that is needed, and we can do it with your help. So please go to our website, decolonizingwealth.com, click on donate. No gift is too small. Decolonizingwealth.com. Please join our circle of donors. Thank you so much. Now, while you're giving, buckle your seatbelt for another powerful performance from my friend, Charly Lowry. Charly is an artivist, a change maker who challenges norms and inspires generations with her music. Her life experiences are guiding her in a music career that is focused upon increasing Indigenous visibility on a global scale and revitalizing and preserving our cultures. Take it away, Charly.
Schwinn. Hello, my name is Charly Lowry. Honored to be here with you today to celebrate Mother Earth for the 2022 Indigenous Earth Summit. Now more than ever, we need to love, protect, and be good stewards of the land that has provided us with merciful bounty and a wealth of resources since the beginning of time. This is a song of gratitude entitled Mother Earth. I don't throw a fit, I stay fixed, still I rise, yeah that's right, I ain't trying to fight, I'm just trying to be strong, so I'm trying to right or wrong, and Mother, you do us right when we do you wrong. I don't throw a fit, I stay fixed, still I rise, yeah that's right, I ain't trying to fight, I'm just trying to be strong, so I'm trying to right or wrong, and Mother, you do us right when we do you wrong. Mother.
Charly, thank you. Us Lumbies know how to cut a rug, don't we? Now, before we wrap, I have a truly special honor to bring to the stage David Archambault, who will introduce our final video of the evening. Dave is the former tribal chairman of the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in North Dakota. He was instrumental in the Dakota Access Pipeline protests and continues to work to promote an understanding of the historical treaty rights and Indigenous rights of Native American people. Dave, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Edgar. I just want to say how amazed I was at the show you have and the two panels that I listened to. They're all awesome people, and just thank you and good job. And so just to introduce my video that we have. Over the past 2 years, I've been working on regenerative ag at home. Regenerative ag is basically bringing life back underneath the surface. And when you do that, a lot of good things happen. And this past fall, I worked with a company called Root Foundations, and Root was experimenting with some cable technology and solar. So I thought, how can we introduce this to the regenerative ag practice? And I just think that when you put the land back into the hands of Indigenous people, it makes that understanding that we have come to fruition, and that knowledge of nature being able to do what it's supposed to do, thrive. And if we do this, if we empower Indigenous communities, Indigenous lives, and give them the opportunity to introduce system changes, then we can make an impact to the trajectory of climate change. So I hope you guys enjoy the video. Thank you.
My name is Dave Archambault. We are here on Standing Rock in the community of Cannonball. Not too far from us, probably a mile down the road, we resisted a Dakota Access Pipeline. There were probably 10,000 or more people who came to Standing Rock and supported us in our resistance. Today, the pipeline is underneath the river pumping oil. But what I wanted to try to do is something good for the land. With fossil fuel industry, we see a lot of destruction, things that we can't turn back. For the past 2 years, I've been working on this land, regenerating the soil so that life can thrive underneath. The land was sprayed, and those chemicals created a hard surface so that it was very difficult for anything to grow. What we're trying to do is bring back the soil so that it can absorb water and so that it can create long root systems and just have microorganisms thriving underneath. And when you have that, it brings back a lot of animals, a lot of insects, and just let nature do its course. It's really important for us to try to regenerate, but at the same time, when I look at the energy needs of this country or of the world, I really like what we're experimenting with here. It's a solar panel that tracks the sun using cables. It'll have a brain center that knows where the sun's at, and it will adjust the panel so that it gets the most reflection off the surface and absorb most of the energy throughout the day. And it's a demonstration, but once it proves out, it'll also serve an additional purpose for land regeneration and regenerative agriculture. When you do regenerative agriculture, you manage how the livestock graze. This past summer we had a drought, and it was really hard on the cattle. It was hot, 114 degrees. And the project that we're doing here, the solar project, it's high enough so that livestock could go underneath. Then the center poles will have a scratch pole so that the cows can rub and scratch on it. We want to prove that it can take the amount of force, the amount of wind. We get 70 to 90 miles of wind here, and we want to prove that the technology and this large sail that we have will stand up to it and provide the shade for cattle in hot summer days. Just graze the soil and bring back to life, doing the things that Mother Earth intended animals to do.
Dave, thank you so much. I'm so inspired from Standing Rock to leading in sustainability. I've learned so much this evening, and I'm inspired to do more to more of my part to protect this planet. So now it's time to close. I just want to quickly say again, thank you to REI for the sponsorship, and a big thank you to my team at DWP for your amazing leadership. Folks really worked hard to pull this summit together, and we're all so grateful. I also want to shout out the team at Idea to Form, who has been behind the scenes hustling and producing this event with us, lock and step. You guys are fantastic. And thank you, everyone who has tuned in, everyone for listening, for opening your heart to give, to everyone who has retweeted, posted, liked, followed, all those things to make this evening a success. We're so grateful. And last but absolutely not least, thanks to our Mother Earth. How can we ever repay you? We appreciate you all. Please stay in touch and have a great night.